Imagine a book that challenges everything you know about the history of Christianity. The Gospel of Judas, an apocryphal text, emerges as an enigma, revealing a controversial view of the most famous betrayal of all time. But why does this narrative, dating back to the 2nd century, still provoke so much debate? Now, think, what if Judas Iscariot wasn't the villain we've always believed? What happens to our faith and understanding if this much demonized character has a story to tell that changes everything? This gospel presents Judas as an ally of Jesus, offering a perspective that goes against the tide of Christian tradition. As we delve into the depths of this work, we find more than simple heresies. We are confronted with questions that make us reflect on our own beliefs. Who are the apostles, really? And what is the true role of betrayal in the divine narrative? Prepare for a journey that might challenge your views on salvation, guilt, and, of course, the love of God. Stay tuned because what comes next could change your perception of the redemption story. The Gospel of Judas is an intriguing text that dates back to a historically complex period. Discovered in the 1970s, this gospel was found in a manuscript in poor condition, which only increased its value and importance. Its origin is linked to a group of Gnostic Christians who sought to understand and reinterpret the central figures and events of Christianity. The story of its rediscovery is almost as fascinating as the content of the text itself, as it was kept in obscurity for centuries before emerging for academic debate. The manuscript was discovered in a cave in Egypt, and its authenticity was confirmed after careful analysis. Scholars believe the text was written in the 2nd century, a time when Christian communities were diversifying and splitting into various schools of thought. Its discovery brought to light questions about the plurality of early Christian beliefs. After all, what was known about Judas Iscariot and his role? The Gospel of Judas presents a radically different view of the apostle, challenging established narratives. It's worth noting that the rediscovery of the gospel was not straightforward. Throughout its journey to scholars, the manuscript passed through many hands and was often misinterpreted or even damaged. The text only gained proper recognition in recent decades when researchers began translating and analyzing its pages. Once the academic community started paying attention to the gospel, it became a focal point of intense discussion about the true nature of early Christianity and the contexts that shaped its doctrines. Moreover, the origin of the Gospel of Judas raises questions about the canonicity of religious texts. Why was this gospel excluded from traditional canons? What were the intentions of its authors? These inquiries intertwine with the quest for truth in the accounts of Jesus and his disciples. Thus, the Gospel of Judas is not just a document, but a fragment of a broader debate that permeates the history of the Church. The manner in which the Gospel was discovered and its initial reception by society also reflect the challenges faced by apocryphal texts. Its rescue from obscurity is, therefore, a testament to the complexity of religious history and the struggle for the preservation and interpretation of ideas that challenge the status quo. The content of the Gospel of Judas is undoubtedly one of the most fascinating aspects of this text. Unlike the traditional narratives found in the canonical Gospels, the Gospel of Judas presents a more complex and often controversial view of Jesus and his teachings. One of the main themes of the text is the relationship between Judas and Jesus, who, according to this narrative, is not a traitor, but an apostle chosen to play a crucial role in the salvation of humanity. The structure of the Gospel is also quite peculiar. It is divided into sections that address different aspects of Jesus' life and mission. The text includes dialogues between Judas and Jesus, where the latter reveals secrets and mysteries about the kingdom of God. This form of presentation is characteristic of Gnostic texts, which often use dialogues to convey esoteric teachings. The emphasis on secret knowledge is a hallmark of Gnosticism, and the Gospel of Judas is no exception. Another notable feature is the way the Gospel deals with the issue of sin and redemption. Instead of focusing on Judas's betrayal as an act of disloyalty, the text suggests that his action was necessary for the prophecy to be fulfilled. This reinterpretation of Judas's role provokes deep reflections on the nature of free will and destiny. The reader is led to question whether Judas truly had a choice or if he was fulfilling a divine mission. The main themes addressed in the Gospel also include criticism of the religious society of the time. Judas expresses dissatisfaction with the practices of the other apostles and the hypocrisy that permeated their actions. This social criticism is an important characteristic of Gnostic texts, which often position themselves against traditional religious institutions. This critical view of the gospel offers a new perspective on the tensions that existed in the early Christian communities. The Gospel of Judas not only provides a different look at Judas Iscariot, but also invites the reader to explore broader questions about faith, loyalty, and the quest for knowledge. The text, with its rich language and symbolism, is an invitation to reflection and introspection, characteristics that make it unique in the panorama of apocryphal texts. The figure of Judas Iscariot, traditionally seen as the traitor who betrayed Jesus, is reimagined in the Gospel of Judas in a surprising way. Throughout the text, Judas appears not as a villain, but as an apostle who plays an essential role in the divine plan. This reinterpretation is one of the Gospel's most significant contributions, offering a new perspective on a frequently misunderstood character. In the context of the Gospel, the relationship between Judas and Jesus is presented as one of trust and revelation. Jesus confides secrets to Judas that he does not share with the other apostles, implying that Judas has a deeper understanding of Jesus' true mission. This idea that Judas holds privileged knowledge redefines the narrative of betrayal and suggests that his action was, in fact, an act of obedience to a divine order. Additionally, the text suggests that Judas's betrayal was not an act of malice, but a necessary part of the salvation plan. This vision raises several relevant theological questions, such as the nature of Jesus' sacrifice and the role of suffering in redemption. Judas, in this sense, becomes a tragic figure, caught between his destiny and the divine call. The reinterpretation of Judas also reflects a broader critique of power structures within Christian communities. The Gospel questions the morality of the other apostles and highlights the hypocrisy that permeates their actions. This critique not only humanizes Judas, but also offers a more complex view of leadership in the early church, challenging established standards of who is worthy of being considered a true disciple. The conception of Judas in the Gospel of Judas not only transforms the figure of the apostle, but also provokes the reader to reflect on the nature of good and evil, obedience and betrayal. By doing so, the text invites a reevaluation of traditional stories and an openness to new interpretations of the events that shaped the faith. The Gospel of Judas is often associated with Gnosticism, a religious movement that flourished in the early centuries of the Christian era. To understand this relationship, it is essential to know what Gnosticism is, a current that emphasizes esoteric knowledge and the search for spiritual truth, in contrast to the more orthodox beliefs of the early church. The apocryphal text, by presenting an alternative view of Judas and his role in the Christian narrative, reflects many Gnostic principles, which valued personal revelation and deep understanding of divinity. Additionally, Gnosticism proposes a dualistic view of the world, where good and evil are in constant conflict. This view manifests in the Gospel of Judas, suggesting that the God of the Old Testament is an inferior being, an idea that echoes the Gnostic critique of the demiurge, an entity that creates and governs the physical world but is seen as imperfect. This type of thinking contrasts with the traditional Christian view, which considers God supreme and perfectly good. Another important aspect is how Gnosticism deals with the figure of Jesus. In the Gospel of Judas, Jesus is presented as someone who possesses secret knowledge, which is revealed to Judas, making him a central character in the work. This idea of hidden knowledge is a hallmark of Gnosticism, which often believed that salvation came through knowledge rather than blind faith. Thus, the relationship between Judas and Jesus becomes a representation of this Gnostic ideal of the quest for wisdom. The influence of Gnosticism in the Gospel of Judas also raises questions about the nature of salvation. For the Gnostics, salvation was a process of self-knowledge and liberation from the material world. This is reflected in how the text develops the idea that Judas, by betraying Jesus, was actually helping him fulfill his destiny, a reinterpretation that challenges conventional narratives of betrayal. This alternative view offers a new perspective on Jesus' sacrifice and the nature of the divine plan. The presence of Gnostic concepts in the Gospel of Judas not only enriches the understanding of the text, but also challenges the established traditions of the early church. Its discovery and analysis provoked debates about the diversity of thoughts that coexisted in the early days of Christianity, showing that there was a range of interpretations and beliefs that, in some way, influenced the formation of Christian theology. When comparing the Gospel of Judas with the canonical Gospels, some differences and similarities stand out. Firstly, while the New Testament Gospels aim to tell the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus in a way that emphasizes his divinity and the salvation of mankind, the Gospel of Judas presents a unique perspective, focusing on the relationship between Judas and Jesus. This relationship is marked by an intimate dialogue not found in the canonical narratives, where Judas is traditionally seen as the villain. Furthermore, the Gospel of Judas challenges the betrayal narrative, proposing that Judas, contrary to popular belief, was fulfilling an essential role in the divine plan. This idea is radically different from the representations of Judas in the canonical scriptures, which portray him as the traitor who handed Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver. This new interpretation questions the morality of betrayal and suggests that Judas had a deeper understanding of Jesus' purpose, leading to a substantial conflict of ideas between the texts. Another point of comparison is the language and structure of the texts. The canonical Gospels are generally more narrative and follow a clear timeline, whereas the Gospel of Judas adopts a more philosophical and dialogical form. This approach allows for a deeper exploration of theological and existential concepts, which are often superficial or absent in the canonical Gospels. The difference in how the stories are told reflects the diverse intentions of the authors and the audiences they were addressing. The similarities also cannot be ignored. Both sets of texts share central themes such as the divinity of Jesus, the quest for salvation, and the struggle between good and evil. The main difference lies in how these themes are approached. While the canonical Gospels present a narrative aimed at edifying Christian faith, the Gospel of Judas proposes a critical reflection on the figure of Jesus and Judas's role, opening space for a more complex and multifaceted interpretation. The comparison between the Gospel of Judas and the canonical Gospels reveals the diversity of thoughts that existed in the early centuries of Christianity. This diversity is a testament to the richness and complexity of the Christian tradition, which is not limited to a single narrative or interpretation, but is composed of a tapestry of stories and teachings that together form the foundation of faith. The reception of the Gospel of Judas by the early church was marked by strong rejection, leading to its classification as heresy. This reaction can be understood within the context in which the church was establishing itself, seeking to consolidate an orthodox doctrine that opposed deviant teachings. The Gospel of Judas, by presenting a radically different view of Judas and the role of betrayal, directly challenged the beliefs the church was trying to cement. Heresiology, or the study of heresies, became a crucial part of the formation of Christian doctrine. Church leaders, such as Irenaeus of Lyons, wrote extensively against Gnosticism and its alternative interpretations, considering them threats to the true Christian faith. The Gospel of Judas, with its innovative ideas and reinterpretation of the events of Jesus' life, was one of the many works condemned and labeled heretical. This condemnation was not just a theological issue, but also a struggle for power and the definition of what would be considered Christian. Additionally, the early church's reaction reflects the fear that the dissemination of texts like the Gospel of Judas could lead to even greater fragmentation of the Christian community. The diversity of thoughts and plurality of interpretations were seen as dangerous, as they could weaken the unity of faith. Thus, heresiology became a tool of control, allowing the church to maintain cohesion among the faithful and ensure the prevalence of its doctrines. The classification of the Gospel of Judas as heresy also had lasting implications. The story of Judas is often viewed negatively, which has affected his image over the centuries. This condemnation contributed to the construction of a stigma around Judas, solidifying the idea that he was the ultimate traitor and a figure to be despised. This narrative, perpetuated over time, contributed to the marginalization of ideas that could have enriched theological dialogue. The early church's reaction to the Gospel of Judas serves as a reminder of the constant struggle between orthodox and heretical beliefs within the history of Christianity. The way the church dealt with these texts reflects not only theological issues, but also social and political dynamics that shaped the trajectory of Christianity. The condemnation of Judas illustrates the complexity of the narratives that compose the history of faith, showing that the search for truth is often accompanied by conflicts and controversies. The Gospel of Judas is a text that, when analyzed, raises a series of fascinating theological questions. One of the main implications is the reinterpretation of the figure of Judas Iscariot, who is traditionally seen as Jesus' traitor. In the Gospel of Judas, Judas is presented as an apostle who, contrary to popular belief, plays a fundamental role in the divine plan. This vision challenges the conventional narrative and suggests that Judas's betrayal was, in a way, necessary for Jesus' mission to be accomplished. This idea raises questions about free will and predestination, themes that have been debated throughout the history of Christian theology. The idea that Judas could have been an agent of good instead of evil also invites reflection on the concept of salvation and sacrifice. If Judas had an essential role in Jesus' crucifixion, it implies that all acts, even those that seem negative, can have a greater purpose within the divine plan. This perspective can offer consolation to those who feel lost or guilty for their actions, suggesting that even mistakes can be part of a grand design. Thus, the Gospel of Judas provokes reconsideration of the dualism between good and evil, leading to a more complex view of morality. Another important implication is the issue of knowledge and revelation. In the text, Judas receives secret teachings that are not shared with the other apostles. This aligns with the Gnostic idea that knowledge is the key to salvation. This emphasis on hidden knowledge can be seen as a critique of the early church, which tended to value faith over intellectual pursuit. Therefore, the Gospel of Judas not only questions Judas's image, but also challenges the church's authority structure, suggesting that truth may be more complex and not accessible to all. Moreover, the cosmology presented in the Gospel of Judas also has profound philosophical implications. The text suggests a view of the universe where the material world is seen as inferior or corrupted, an idea that resonates with some philosophical and religious traditions. This vision can lead the faithful to question the nature of creation and the relationship between God and the world. If the physical world is a place of imprisonment for souls, how does that affect how Christians view their own existence and purpose? This reflection on the duality of body and soul can influence not only theology, but also ethics and spiritual practice. The implications of the Gospel of Judas extend to the dialogue between different faith traditions. The text, when reevaluated, can contribute to a broader understanding of the diverse interpretations of early Christianity. This plurality of voices and narratives can enrich contemporary theological discourse, allowing people to approach spiritual issues with a more open and inquisitive mind. Therefore, revisiting the figure of Judas and the ideas surrounding him, the Gospel of Judas becomes an invitation to reflect on the complexity of faith and the human experience. In recent years, the Gospel of Judas has been the subject of growing academic interest, reflecting a new wave of studies on apocryphal texts and the diversity of early Christianity. Researchers have been delving into the historical context in which the text was written, considering socio-political and cultural factors that may have influenced its composition. This contextual analysis not only helps to understand the original meaning of the Gospel, but also offers a broader view of the rivalries between different currents within early Christianity. Additionally, modern interpretations have explored the symbolic meaning of the narratives presented in the Gospel of Judas. Many scholars argue that the image of Judas as the bearer of secret knowledge can be interpreted as a critique of orthodoxy. This reading suggests that the text is not just a biography of Judas, but also a meditation on the quest for truth and authenticity in a changing religious landscape. Thus, Judas becomes a symbol of rebellion and questioning, challenging established norms. Another contemporary approach is the comparison between the Gospel of Judas and other Gnostic texts. This comparative analysis helps situate the Gospel within a broader panorama of Gnostic thought, revealing similarities and divergences that enrich the understanding of beliefs at the time. Such studies allow us to perceive how the idea of hidden knowledge and the valorization of personal spiritual experience manifest in different ways in various traditions. This approach not only illuminates the content of the Gospel of Judas, but also broadens the debate on what constitutes the Christian heritage. Moreover, modern research has also focused on the reactions that the Gospel of Judas provokes in the contemporary public. The reinterpretation of Judas as a positive agent resonates with current issues of betrayal, loyalty, and the complexity of human relationships. In an increasingly polarized world, the figure of Judas can serve as a mirror for the difficulties people face when navigating between their beliefs and reality. This new reading can open space for discussions on forgiveness, understanding, and accepting others, even when their actions are questionable. The contemporary interpretations of the Gospel of Judas also have implications for modern religious practice. Groups and communities seeking to reconnect with spirituality often encounter the ideas presented in the text. This rediscovery can lead to a deeper dialogue about the very essence of faith and the need for a more inclusive and less dogmatic approach. Therefore, the studies and interpretations of the Gospel of Judas not only enrich the academic field, but also offer a path for personal reflection and spiritual transformation today. So, have you ever stopped to think about the implications that the Gospel of Judas brings to our understanding of faith? This controversial apocryphal text raises deep questions about betrayal, loyalty, and the true role of Judas Iscariot in the story of Jesus. But what can we really learn from this? Was Judas a villain or a tragic hero? Let's reflect together. How do these heresies fit into our understanding of God's love and grace? Are we ready to challenge our beliefs and open our hearts to new perspectives? The Gospel of Judas may teach us more about mercy than we imagine. And don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments. What do you think about the figure of Judas? Was he misunderstood or did he truly betray Jesus? Your view can enrich the discussion. So, if you liked this theme, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content that will challenge your mind and strengthen your faith. Let's continue this journey of discovery and reflection together. What else would you like to know about apocryphal texts? The next topic might be even more surprising than you imagine.